You are not starting over. You are relapsing. A relapse in disguise, coated with optimism, dressed in hope, renamed as a fresh start. But the truth hides in the shape of your exhaustion. You already know this route. You've walked it too many times. Square one is not a place you arrive at. It's a familiar trench where your identity crawls back to feel something. And that something is not failure. It's recognition. The world knows who you are when you struggle. Your inner circle knows how to respond when you fall. You know how to function when you're rebuilding. Success, however, is alien, silent, empty of validation, unrecognizable. And so your psyche, trained in trauma, chooses to crash, again, just to feel home again. No one told you that repetition can feel safe, that collapse can feel sacred, that the ritual of trying, failing, trying again is not random but engineered. You weren't taught discipline. You were programmed for defeat wrapped in applause. The cycle rewards you emotionally, even as it destroys you functionally. Because at square one, you are active, you are seen, you are in motion. And this movement seduces the system. It consumes your attention, your money, your hope, your time. You are not broken. You are conditioned. Not to win, but to restart. Not to complete, but to keep becoming. Every reset sells a new version of you, a new chance, a new lie. Your story is not a journey, it's a loop. And what looks like resilience is often just a leash, because real healing is boring, silent, invisible. There's no spotlight in stability, no dopamine in staying. That's why you flee. That's why the pain of peace feels louder than the noise of chaos. You say you want transformation, but every time the new you begins to settle, the old you triggers the alarm. And back you go, to square one, to safety, to suffering. Comment, I don't start over, I return. And now I break the return. You're not afraid of failure. You're afraid of disappearing without it. Because who are you without the comeback? Without the crisis? Without the need to recover? There's an identity behind every collapse. A version of you that only breathes when everything is falling apart. And the tragedy is that this version was built through survival. You were loved when you struggled, praised when you pushed through pain. You learned to speak the language of endurance before you could even define your desires. And now, when life begins to soften, you panic. Because without the fight, who are you supposed to be? You don't sabotage progress because you hate growth. You sabotage it because it threatens the only self you've ever trusted. The one who knows how to rebuild. The one who knows how to fall with grace. The one who knows how to narrate pain so beautifully it becomes inspiring. But what happens when the pain ends? What happens when no one claps anymore? What happens when you're no longer impressive because you're simply, well, that silence terrifies you more than collapse. Because collapse gives you purpose. Healing makes you invisible. The system exploits that. It sells you redemption. It monetizes your bounce back. It thrives on your self-doubt and emotional loyalty to pain. You're not failing because you're weak. You're failing because you're loyal to a version of you that only exists in the ashes. And until you break that emotional contract, you will keep returning to square one, not to rebuild, but to remember yourself. And the cost of that memory is your future. Comment, I am not loyal to collapse anymore. There is a gravity to collapse, a magnetic pull that feels strangely warm. You don't go back to square one because you're lost. You go back because it's the only place where you've ever felt seen. Progress, for all its promise, is lonely. Success, for all its shine, is cold. And so the soul, conditioned in pain, drifts back to the fire it knows, even if it burns. Square one isn't just a starting point. It's an emotional homeland, a space where the wounds have names, where you still know how to move, where the rituals of effort, exhaustion, and apology still make sense. You don't fear change. You fear the silence that comes after you've changed. This return is not weakness, no. It's loyalty. Loyalty to the version of you that built their worth inside the struggle. Loyalty to the environments that applauded your effort but never your ease. loyalty to communities that bonded through trauma but disintegrate in triumph. So when the growth begins to separate you, when peace starts to isolate, you self-destruct, not for failure's sake, but for connection. You crash as a way to remain, as a way to still belong. Because success demands solitude, and your nervous system still equates solitude with abandonment. The system profits from this loop. It feeds off the narrative that every comeback is noble. It sells inspiration in the form of your relapses. It rebrands your regression as content. Your crash becomes a chapter. Your relapse, a reel. And before long, your inability to stay becomes your entire brand. You don't even realize it. You're too busy rebuilding again, framing your fall as another opportunity, calling your return to square one resilience when it's really just repetition. Marketable, predictable, profitable. But what if you didn't fall this time? What if you outgrew the identity that needs the fall to feel human? What if your real breakthrough was staying upright, without applause, without a crisis to explain yourself? That stillness, that's the point of no return. Comment: I don't collapse to connect anymore. The system was never built for your freedom. It was built for your repetition. Not your transformation, but your rebranding. Not your healing, but your high-performance relapse. You are far more valuable to the market when you're almost there, because each new attempt means new consumption, more coaching, more content, more gear for a self you're still chasing. You are not encouraged to arrive. You are trained to circulate. Square one isn't your failure, it's your monetization model. And the more you try to escape it with new methods, new plans, new affirmations, the deeper you fall into its orbit. Because nothing sustains you like a story, and the system has been feeding you one since the beginning, that your worth lives in the comeback, not in the calm. They reward your restart. They market your struggle. They glamorize your journey back from the fall. Platforms push visibility when you're vulnerable. Algorithms amplify your breakdowns. The narrative of trying again becomes more addictive than actual growth, and you unknowingly begin to perform it. You fall publicly, cry eloquently, rebuild visibly, and suddenly, your self-sabotage becomes a brand. Not a flaw, but a format. Not a pain, but a performance. You are not relapsing in private. You are collapsing on command, and the applause keeps you repeating. This isn't just a loop. It's a trap disguised as progress. Because even your self-awareness becomes content. Even your insights are monetized. You become an infinite self-improvement machine, designed to never complete the mission. Because the moment you do, they lose you. And you lose the story. And without the story, who are you? That's the real fear. That if you stop chasing healing, you'll have to live without a wound. And if you stop falling, you'll have to live without the redemption. So what would it mean to never start over again? To deny the applause, to bury the comeback, to no longer be the hero of your own breakdown, but the quiet, steady keeper of your own peace? Comment: I bury the comeback. I don't need to rise again. You don't just fall, you reconstruct your collapse, deliberately, subconsciously, with precision disguised as bad luck. Every forgotten step, every impulsive choice, every delayed action isn't random, it's ritual. Because somewhere inside you, failure feels safer than freedom. At least in failure, you know the rules. You know how to suffer. You know how to be seen. Success, on the other hand, is disorienting, unmapped, unwitnessed. When things start to go well, your nervous system doesn't celebrate, it prepares for threat. And if no threat appears, it invents one. That's not weakness, that's loyalty. Loyalty to the emotional climate you were raised in, to the self that only exists in crisis, to the pattern that taught you, peace is suspicious. You don't sabotage progress because you hate yourself. You sabotage it because you still believe pain is the price of belonging. You were taught to earn rest, to justify ease, to bleed before being seen. And so when things start to stabilize, you get restless. You pick a fight, miss a deadline, spend what you don't have, not for pleasure, for alignment, to feel like yourself again, to re-enter the role of the struggler, because the self who thrives still feels like an imposter, because the version of you who wins has no script, no witnesses, no history. You don't know how to be them, so you return, not because you want to, because you don't yet know how to survive peace without guilt. This is the hidden engine of the cycle, not laziness, not failure, but emotional fidelity to the past. And unless you rewrite that loyalty, not logically, but symbolically, your mind will keep dragging you back to familiar ruin. It will choose the pain it understands over the silence it fears. And your life will be a gallery of unfinished transformations, each one cut short not by inability, but by identity. Comment: I release the self that only feels real in crisis. There comes a moment when the collapse no longer serves you, when the ritual of relapse turns to ash, when you look at square one not with longing, not with guilt, but with clarity. You see it for what it truly is, a mausoleum, a graveyard of the selves you kept resuscitating just to feel real. And now at last you stop, not with rage, not with revenge, but with reverence. Because breaking the cycle is not an act of violence. It's an act of mourning. You are not escaping the past. You are burying the version of you that needed to restart in order to feel alive. This is not the climax of your comeback. This is the quiet after the war. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to repackage your survival into a story. You don't need to turn your exhaustion into insight, your heartbreak into growth, your pause into productivity. You don't need to begin again, because nothing ended. The version of you that kept falling is still whispering, but now you recognize it as an echo, not a command. That voice will say, "Are you sure you can hold this?" And you will answer, "Yes." And I don't owe anyone a fall to prove it. Let the world expect your return to the start. Let the story beg for one more act. Let the system bait you with another chance at rebranding your pain. You are done, not bitter, not broken, just done. You are not a work in progress. You are not a phoenix. You are not the wounded warrior on their 5th rebirth. You are a self that stays, a self that holds, a self that refuses to collapse again just to feel worthy of being here. Close your eyes. Picture the line behind you. Not a loop, a rupture, a fracture in time where the cycle ended, not with force but with stillness. This is the new beginning. You'll never start again. No more falls, no more restarts, no more rituals of ruin. Comment: I stay. I hold. I never fall again. Share this with someone who still thinks collapse is a requirement. Subscribe if you've buried the need to begin again.